Hey guys, what's up? It's Miss Simon. Welcome back to another fun lecture of biology. Today we're going to be talking about this thing called symbiosis. Symbiosis. So to recap what we learned last lecture, we talked about various ecosystems, various environments in the natural world, right? We looked at this rainforest picture, a tundra, and a marine ecosystem. We learned these two words that meant living and non-living, right? Because every environment, every ecosystem is made up of living things like you and I, and non-living things like rocks, right? And we learned about the word for living things is what? What's the word for living things? Yes, biotic factors. What about the term for non-living things? Abiotic. Yes, good job. Okay, so now that we're recapped that, let's move on. So today we are talking about interactions within the community. So we have predation, competition, and symbiosis. And remember that at the community level, what was it again? Living organisms that are the different species. Right? So we have zebras, vultures, a tree. Those are different species in the same area. That is a community. So we're going to look at some interactions between organisms of different species. So predators hunt, kill, and eat other organisms, while the prey is known as the organism that gets eaten. That is what predation means. There's a predator and there's a prey. So in this image right here, who would you think is the predator? Who is the one doing the hunting, the killing, and the eating? And then who do you think is the prey? Who's being eaten? Exactly. Predator, prey. Predator, prey. That is predation. However, all living things on Earth need natural resources. All living things on Earth need natural resources. So an example of that, water, right? We all need to drink water. If you don't drink water, you will not survive for very long periods of time. However, there's not enough for everyone. There's just not enough for everyone. There's not enough water in the world for everyone and every organism and every plant. There's not enough food for every organism on Earth. There's not enough space. There's not enough any of that. So that means that organisms are going to have to fight to get the resources in order to survive. So look at this picture right here. We see these two dogs. They're both baring their teeth. They look like they're about to fight over this bone, right? Because there's only one, looks like one bone. Now, if there were a whole mountain of bones, would they fight? No, they wouldn't. But since the resource, the bone, is limited, there's a very little bit of it, then they're going to fight over it. And this happens all of the time, right? This thing is called competition. The word to compete means you're fighting for a limited resource of some sort. Okay, so organisms are fighting for a limited resource. Water is not the only limited resource, right? Space is also a limited resource. There's only so much space in a city. Think about a city like New York, where there's very little space. So in order to get a big space, a big house, a big apartment or something in somewhere like New York or LA, then you're going to have to pay a lot of money, right? You're going to have to fight for it to get that space. Oxygen is also a limited resource. There's only so much oxygen in the lower parts of the ocean. So organisms will have to fight to get oxygen if they live in the lower part of the ocean. And even food supply. We know about that in humanity, right? There's only so much food that's being distributed. So people often have to fight for it. Competition also can look like fighting over money, fighting for money, going to a job and fighting for your money. So competition is seen across any limited resource whatsoever. So I lived in Cape Town, South Africa for one summer, and I volunteered there. And at the time that I visited, Cape Town actually was experiencing an extreme water crisis. It is known as the worst water crisis in modern history of a major city. So whenever I got off the plane and I went to the bathroom to try and wash my hands, splashing water on my face, no water came out of the faucets in the airport. So what came out was just mist, little droplets, right? And it was like that for the entire time that I stayed. Hand sanitizer was my best friend. We had to limit our showers to only about 2 minutes. So just very quickly, because there's not enough water for all the people who live there. So when I was there, I also heard lots of stories about people actually getting into fights and being arrested over the water. Because there's certain taps that they can go to and get water. And once those taps started to run out, people would start arguing and fighting and whatnot because they want to take that water home for their families. So people were fighting, people were being arrested. There was lots of things going on because that was a limited resource. So people had to compete in certain ways to get that limited resource. Okay, switching topics, switching gears. So we have carrying capacity. So look at this image right here. You see this image right here? Look at that. Do these fish look comfortable? Do you think that this environment of this fishbowl environment, can this sustain life for all of them? Can they all survive in that fishbowl? How about these fish? Same size fishbowl, right? Same environment. Do these fish look comfortable? Can this environment sustain life for all of them? Right? So there's this such thing as a carrying capacity. So each ecosystem can only provide for so many organisms. And then once you pass that limit that the ecosystem can carry, then organisms cannot get resources that they need to survive and they will start to die. Right? It's a bit morbid to say, it's a bit scary to say, but that is true. Organisms that cannot get resources will die off. Right? So that's what this thing is called, carrying capacity. So let's look at this graph. So you see over here, it says population in millions. So this is the population size. And this down here is across time. So over time, the population was growing. And then it reached a point in which a lot of organisms died off. Right? The population was up here. And then suddenly it's down here. It dropped. So a bunch of organisms died off. And then the population got back comfortable, and then they got above their limit and died off. And it keeps doing that. So scientists can find this line that is called the carrying capacity. That's the capacity in which this environment, this ecosystem, can actually support those organisms. And then once it gets above a certain limit, those resources are so limited that those organisms cannot get resources and will die off. And as you can see, this ecosystem right here, they are below carrying capacity. Everyone can survive. But down here, and this one, they're above carrying capacity, right? These organisms cannot survive, and so some of them have died off. You can see right here, there's one that's already dead, and some that are on their way out. This brings us to our next topic of symbiosis. So symbiosis is going to be close interactions between individuals over an extended period of time. It impacts resources and populations. So we're talking about interactions between individuals. So one-in-one, symbiosis. So first things first, before we get into what is symbiosis, we want to talk about the different types of interactions. So a positive interaction is going to be when an organism is benefited or helped in some way. Then we have neutral situations, when an organism is unaffected by what is going on. So whatever's happening doesn't matter to them. It's not bad, it's not good, they don't really care, they're fine, they're neutral. And then we have negative interactions in which an organism is hurt or offended in some way. So we have this thing called commensalism. Commensalism is when one organism is benefited while the other organism is just, nothing's happening, they're fine. So in this example, birds nesting in a tree. See this right here? This is a tree, and there's a bird with a nest. So the tree and the bird are the organisms, right? They're both alive. So the bird is being benefited because it's able to have shelter. It's able to have a home because this tree gives them a home. While the tree is unaffected. Nothing happens for the tree, so it's unaffected. So this relationship right here between these two organisms is called commensalism. Next up, we have this thing called mutualism. So again, one organism is benefited, but in this situation, both of them are benefited. So an example of that will be honeybees and flowers. So let's look right here. We see some bees, we see some flowers, they're buzzing about, they look happy. You see those smiles, those beautiful smiles? Yes. So the bee in this scenario is getting nectar, And that nectar allows them to make honey, which we know bees love to make honey. While this flower is benefited because as the bee hops from one flower to the next, it brings pollen with it. And as we know, when flowers get pollinated, they reproduce, they make more plants, and they survive better. So they both are being benefited in this situation. Parasitism is when one organism benefits and the other one is being harmed, is being hurt. Okay? So for example, if that would be a tick on a dog's fur. So the tick is happy. The tick is very happy because he's getting to drink blood, and drinking blood is what he likes to drink. While the dog is sickened and in pain and hurting and whatnot. So the dog is actually the one that's being hurt, and the tick is the one that is being benefited. That is parasitism, parasites. Donkey and the dog. So the dog rides on the donkey, and the donkey does not care if he rides or not. So here's a little visual of that. This is a donkey, and this is a dog riding on the donkey. So in this situation, you want to ask yourself, what's happening to the donkey? Is he being hurt, benefited, or doesn't care? And what's happening to the dog? Is the dog being hurt? Is the dog being benefited? Or is the dog not being affected in any way? So first things first, you see the dog rides on the donkey. Would you say that that is a benefit, a hurt, or a neutral situation? Okay, then it says the donkey does not care if the dog rides or not. So for the donkey, would you care or not? Okay, so the dog is being benefited because it's getting a free ride. The donkey does not care. It literally says it, the donkey's unaffected. So we have a plus and a slash. So we have a benefit and an unaffected. That is commensalism. Let's look at another example. The tomato hornworm is covered with cocoons deposited by the wasps that feed on the worm. So right here, tomato hornworm is covered with cocoons. If you were this worm and you're being covered with something, are you being hurt, helped, or unaffected? If you are the wasps that feed on the worm, are you being hurt, helped, or unaffected? Okay, so that combination is what? Good job. On to the next. The lynx is a carnivore that hunts, captures, and eats the hare. What type of relationship do we talk about? Hunting, capturing, and eating. Good job. If you said predation, good job. Cow and cattle egret. So the cattle egret, that's this bird, rides on the back of the cow and eats bugs and insects that are feeding on the cow. So if you are this egret and you are eating bugs and insects, are you being hurt, helped, or unaffected? Okay? And then if you are the cow and something is eating the insects that are feeding on you, are you being hurt, helped, or unaffected? Good job. I think this is our last example. Almost died. I'm sorry. The moray eel and cleaner shrimp. So there's this shrimp, that's this right here, eats parasites off of the moray eel. So if you are the shrimp and you're eating, are you being hurt, helped, or unaffected? Okay, if you are this eel and you had parasites on you that are being cleaned off, are you being hurt, helped, or unaffected? Okay, so thank you for watching today's lecture video. Now that you're completed with this, make sure that you do your virtual notebook and your exit ticket. That exit ticket is very important because that is how I count you present for your attendance. Okay, so make sure that you get your work done. Thank you.